Normally, when a new patch comes out with some fresh DLC, I want to breeze past the frequently less exciting patch stuff and get to the new toys. But I discussed the new toys in my previous video, which leaves us with the surprisingly less boring patch notes, at least for me. In fact, 1.4.1 might seem like a good serviceable patch that will make the game more interesting, but I think it's going to change the way we see many of the civs and leaders from here on, or, at least until the next patch. Let's go through some of the main elements here. There's a new archipelago map, which is good since I've become a fan of archipelago games in Civ 7. So I'm going to try that out as soon as I put a good naval idea together. So not today, I'll put it that way. And we now have Hot Seat. Yeah, I'm one of the people who's asking for this. And I will be trying it out as soon as my son and I are in the same time zone again. That's been the problem so far here. The next item on the patch notes list is happiness, government, and celebrations. I'll talk about the first two of those items a little more extensively in a bit, but let's address celebrations. The duration of the celebration is going to be shortened from 10 to 6 turns because players are finding it too easy to play an age end to end without hardly leaving celebration mode. I can't say I had that experience, but I'll just nod along at the devs wanting to make celebrations more challenging and meaningful. I mean, those are both good things, especially the events and items that enhance celebrations, so they will become more meaningful as well. So I think it could be a good move overall. We'll try it out. That's all we can do. And then there's a temporary fix to one of the crises in exploration. And by fix, I mean it's been eliminated. And they have a general eye to the future of crises and how they might change in the game. Fair enough. That's all good stuff. It's still in the speculative stage, and as far as we're concerned, that's where it's going to stay until we've got more details. Then we have the DLC and the new wonders, 2 natural, 2 human-made. I'll definitely be covering these in some upcoming playthroughs, so we'll put them on the back burner for today for the most part. Meanwhile, back to governments and happiness. The rest of this video is going to be just about that, in case you're wondering. I'm just going to read directly from the first passage about governments in the patch notes. Governments have been updated to include a passive effect, 2 celebration options, and 2 new traditions available via the civics tree based on the choice of government. The passive effect is always active once you choose a government, and the traditions must be unlocked to be used and retained in the next age. Traditions from governments you have not chosen will not appear on the civics tree. No changes have been made to when a government is selected or what governments are available. So, same 3 we usually get, say, in antiquity. And here's the dev note. We've spread some of the power of governments across their passives, celebrations, and traditions. Some governments might lean heavier into maximizing their passives, while others will require getting more celebrations or tradition slots. This continues our efforts in enabling asymmetric or highly directional gameplay, and we're keeping a close eye on your feedback. So let's just look at the government choices for antiquity now and see what we have. Like they said, we still have the 3 types to pick from. In this case, classical republic, despotism, and oligarchy. But you can see the passive ability for each of them at the top, and they're all different. Then below that, the celebration options in each column, and then the 2 traditions for each type of government. I like the idea that you get different traditions depending on which type of government you take. And I like that those traditions get passed down with you as you advance into the next stage. So, more traditions. You got to like that. All in all, the options just feel more plentiful than they used to in picking government. And yeah, I'd have to agree, more meaningful. And sure, there's some replayability too, but I wonder if we're all going to fall into the habit of choosing one type of government more often than the others. We were kind of leaning that way before today's patch. That's not important ultimately. It's knowing that the choice of government is more complex and I think more interesting now. The other thing to note, though, is how important happiness is in each of these government types, for one reason or another. And that brings me to what I think of as by far the most important aspect of this patch. Players have had an uneasy or complicated relationship with happiness in this game, and who knows, maybe in life. I don't know. I'm not judging. More often than not, happiness was less something you wanted to get than unhappiness was something you wanted to avoid. People thought of happiness as a burden you had to meet just to be able to expand your empire without crushing your people's protests under your armored heel. Well, now there are going to be stages of happiness. Is that just like the 5 stages of the grief? Oh, and look, there are 5 stages of happiness. Ecstatic, 40 plus happiness per age. Joyous, 20 to 39 happiness per age. Happy, 0 to 19 happiness per age. Unhappy, minus 19 to minus 1 happiness, not per age. I got to figure that part out, not per age. I'm not sure what, anyway. Angry, that's minus 20 happiness or lower, not per age. And you can now see what that looks like in the government overview tab in the game. You can see how many settlements are in each category, and I love this. Although it would be a little better if you could click on each type and instantly see which settlements were, singing the blues. But you can always glean that by scrolling down the main trading panel, so, it's not hidden information. But this scale feeds into how successful your government type is going to be at any given time. Happiness is more integral to your decision making. Your local happiness is going to determine so many things. And that ties directly into the level of appeal of the land you're settled on. So the appeal lens is going to become much more important, as is a freshwater settle. But let's not focus on the negative, because now this is balanced out by bonuses for your happier settlements, and therefore your civilization as a whole. That's why I like this patch. It gives us a way to balance out the often highly militarized gameplay, but it mostly gives us incentives to create more happiness settlement by settlement. For me, this will probably affect how many settlements I go for. For example, I tend to play expansively, getting every settlement to the bare minimum of 5 happiness just so I can go over the settlement limit again. But if I want to get bonus yields, maybe I want to be less of a rambling man and just put down some roots and grow out to the happy tiles. Maybe instead of 8 settlements, maybe I go for 6 or 7. I'll give you a hint as to how that's going in real time. Today, I've done 2 run-throughs of Antiquity already, and both times I've gotten the bread and circuses triumph for having 50 excess happiness in one settlement. You know how many times I've gotten that triumph before this? Not once. It's a new day, people. And this illustrates the key change. Now there are benefits to happiness where before there were only punishments for unhappiness. Will this slow down conquering types? I mean, I doubt it, because happiness is still something you can leverage and squeeze from terrain, buildings, mementos, and events, not to mention some civs and leaders. And that brings us to the question I want to close out at length with. How does this single change to happiness affect some of the leaders and civs in the game? And a follow-up, who will rise in players' estimations as a result of the new emphasis on happiness? That's something you guys can tell me about in the comments if you like. But it's what I want to wildly speculate about right now. I guess we can look at leaders first. Obviously, happiness can benefit any leader, but there are some who come with pre-installed smiles. The two Ashokas, for example, despite their different tendencies, both rely on happiness as the engine for their empires. At the other end of the spectrum, you have Charlemagne, who doesn't generate a ton of happiness, but dear God, what he could do with the, if you'll pardon the pun, unbridled momentum of happiness and more celebrations. Wow. Then you have Himiko, High Shaman, and her happiness generation on buildings. Does this change put her more on par with her twin, Queen of Wa? Isabella's ability to open the game with highly desired natural wonder terrain is a happiness generator in that particular way, so she can't be discounted. And then you have Jose Rizal and his natural affinity for happiness and celebrations. And even Lafayette gives +1 happiness per age in settlements, doubled in distant lands. Does that lesser ability of his now take on a new significance? Things are maybe even more interesting with the civs. In antiquity, the Han can generate happiness with their Great Wall. The new kid, Heian Japan, is a happiness turbine. That's who you're seeing Himiko with in the game on the screen right now. Happiness might help free up the Kamai's expansionist interests that have been limited a little by happiness penalties. A few civs' unique quarters offer some happiness bonuses, and Shilla can eventually trade up a small happiness storm. But I've saved the Moria as the last antiquity civ here. I think they become much more formidable and flexible with the new happiness mechanic. Happiness mechanic. Wouldn't you love to be able to take yourself to a happiness mechanic and you could find all the blockages? Anyway, just like I said, wildly speculating. In exploration, there are several unique quarters that give you happiness. And the Normans and Abbasid each have a happiness tradition, I think. I think it's a tradition as well. Right, and the Chola also have a unique quarter with some happiness. Overall, I think antiquity has more happiness winners overall, but you can keep the chuckles going through exploration. In modern, I think the big winners are the French, the Ottomans, Qajar, and Mexico. These guys make up for the somewhat weaker happiness contingent in exploration. If you're closing out your game with any of these guys, you can be sure that happiness is going to play a key role in getting you to the winner circle. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be trying some of these out over the next little while. So if any of you have any particular requests for matchups, I'll see what I can do. Overall, this patch has reassured me that the growing number of militaristic leaders is being balanced out by gameplay changes that are keeping the game fun for someone like me who is militarily challenged. We'll just leave it at that. But for now, if you liked what you've seen or heard here, please drop a like or a subscribe down below. This is Civilized Raccoon, and I'll see you next time.